also Judd Gregg, who's a former senator and governor from the state of New Hampshire. And folks, it's good to see both of you. I know you both have some pretty strong opinions about what we can and should be doing. I'm not sure that the government can address all of the issues, but Heidi, maybe there's something that they could do to maybe offer consumers a little relief at this point. What do you think?
Well, at this point, I think they really have to focus on those low-income consumers who need to get to work, who would like to maybe now amp up their employment. You know, we had the great resignation. I think more people with inflation coming the way it is will be looking for more opportunities in the workforce. But the cost of getting to work in places like North Dakota is going higher. And so you're going to see investments in weatherization of homes. As you said, natural gas prices are at an all-time high. You're going to see investments in mass transit. And, you know, I think the one thing that they need to do is avoid gimmicks. Gimmicks like, you know, we're going to eliminate the gas tax for a while. That will have a minimal impact. You know, and I think the governor knows that the true answer to this is a sustainable long-term energy policy so we don't have these wild swings in energy prices. And I think it's important that people look to providing instant relief or some relief right now for people who are really hurting. You know, I can drive where I need to drive, but it's awfully hard for that woman who's cleaning houses to drive from house to house. And so instant relief for them, what can we do for them, but then looking at long-term energy policy that will stabilize prices long-term and use this great domestic supply we have.
I think that the two of you are going to be able to have a very reasonable conversation about long-term things that we can and should be doing, but I don't think we're going to hear a lot of that from Washington these days. Judd, gimmicks is one thing, and then I think just misinformation may be another thing headed our way about what we can do, what's going to be helpful, maybe some of the plans that might be in the works. What do you think of ideas that you've heard to date about how we can fix this?
Well, the great irony here is that this is a self-inflicted wound given to us primarily by our government policies. So to look to the government to straighten it out is a bit ironic, to say the least. I remember, look at it this way. This is basically greenthink meets the real world. And three major things have occurred because we've gone into this policy of greenthink. One, we've lost a major American advantage, which has given us true strength as we moved into this century. And that was energy independence, so that we didn't have to rely on the Middle East and the insanity there. We didn't have to kowtow to the autocrats in Russia or Iran. Second, capital formation, which is capital, which is at the essence of driving energy policy and creating oil and gas exploration, has dried up because of the ESG movement. Last year, private equity funds put $76 billion into renewables. They put $6 billion into oil and gas. And lastly, you've got this incredibly stupid policy, which says Canada and the American oil producers are our enemy. This is our government policy. But Venezuela, who truly is an enemy, and Iran, which is clearly an enemy, we should go to them and try to get them to produce more gas. It's very hard to understand how we want to look to the government to try to straighten out a problem, which has been driven in large part by the government. Sure, you can do little things at the fringe, but what you really have to do is reassert the incentive for the oil and gas industry to get capital and invest and move the product. And all of that is being limited by regulatory excess coming out of Washington.
Judd, I'll agree with that. The points you made 1 and 3 are valid, that if you talk to the energy companies, they will say, look, the government makes it really difficult for us to plan. It doesn't make sense for us to do these things. But the second point you made, that middle point about private equity, look, private equity is doing this because that's what investors, the general public, wants to buy into. So, you know, if you want to look to just business taking care of itself, I think that's not necessarily going to happen, which is why you probably do have to look to government to make it tax incentives, like you mentioned, to actually make it more worthwhile. This is not just the government at this point. This is oil industry executives will tell you they feel dirty walking into their country clubs, and you know, people give them dirty looks.
I rarely disagree with you because you're one of the most thoughtful people in economics and market forces really in our whole community in our whole culture.
Uh-oh.
But I have to disagree with you here. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
I mean,
Everybody
Tell me
enjoys your
what,
vote.
I know that's a
But
but.
the point
Go ahead,
here
tell me the
is,
but.
the but is that if you don't create an atmosphere where people are willing to invest in oil and gas production, because you're saying to them that if you do invest, you will be undermining some social cause. If you've got the college endowment funds, the public employee funds, if you got BlackRock saying, we're just simply not going to invest in oil and gas because it's not politically correct for us to do that, then you don't have the capital available that's necessary for oil and gas industry to explore. This is, we're not talking about the big guys here. We're talking about the risk takers who actually go out and drill things, and they need resources.
But if you talk to those oil and gas industry executives, they will say the problem is our investors at this point want capital back. They want dividend payments. They want us to buy back shares because they've gotten burned in the past when we go in and we actually invest for more and the price of oil plummets. So that's not what their investor base wants right now. Their investor base says, just give me the money. Don't put CapEx back into the ground.
Yeah, well, that's part of the energy policy problem, which is that you've got a government that's essentially saying, if you invest in oil and gas, we're not going to let you get a return because we're going to make it very difficult for those oil and gas companies to make money. There are also other factors like the cost of pipes, the cost of sand, the cost of moving the oil.
Right.
The real factor here is the fact that long-term investment in energy has been undermined, literally destroyed by this political think that is dominating the investment community, driven in large part by the green think coming out of this administration.
I know Heidi has a point and Andrew had a question too. So Heidi, make your point and then Andrew's going to jump in with a question.
well, I mean, once again, we're at the same spot that we're always at in this conversation with the governor. You're going to blame investors because they're concerned about climate. You're going to blame the government for what's happening today when this is an industry that needs a 30, 40-month glide path to get the product to market. And the COVID crisis caused huge disruption in supply side. And so you can't on one hand say the problem is the government, but the government's not going to fix it. We need an energy plan, and that energy plan needs to look at fossil fuels and ask them to become cleaner and better at what they do. And, it's not just as simple as saying, okay, everybody now dump a bunch of money in investment, because this is a supply chain that is greatly worried about sustainability into the future. And climate is going to be a factor into the future. And if you're doing long-term planning, you're going to have to plan for climate restrictions and for carbon restrictions.
And
hey, Judd. I don't know if you want to respond to that, but I just wanted to add one piece of this. You may not hold me in the same high esteem that you do Becky Quick. But,
of course I do. You work for the New York Times,
Let me just suggest this. And I think there's a lot of cross currents here that have led to where we are, some of which very much are true. The government policy has been part of the issue. But I think that what we should probably start to do is stop saying it's one side or the other side or this or that, because the truth is there are lots of other component parts to this, including the private sector, that have made these decisions. And then the question is, how do you effectively, properly incentivize, to the extent that you want the government to be involved in this, to actually change that dynamic? The conundrum is that there are two sides to what to do going forward, which is to say that even though I think there's a lot of people who would like to drill right this second because we need it from a national security perspective, as Heidi's saying, there's a much longer term issue around the climate. You may agree with that or may not, but nonetheless, I think that's the prevailing view. And so then the question is, how do you actually capture that middle?
Well, that's an excellent rhetorical question, Andrew. And I would agree with you and with Heidi that in the long run, we have to have sustainable, renewable policy. But the problem is that there's this attitude that's dominating right now that's saying, well, we have to have it tomorrow. It's sort of a Generation Z view of the world. Everything has to happen today. Well, you can't convert a society and a world that is built around carbon and oil and gas overnight into a non-carbon oil and gas world. The fact is, this world is going to be dominated for 10, 15, 20 years still by the carbon and energy production. And the United States has this unique advantage of being we got more gas than Saudi Arabia. And we can basically undermine our enemies with production. We can undermine Russia and Putin. We can undermine Iran. We can make the Middle East more stable. And we can give Europe the relief it needs in the area of gas in order to live well through production in the United States. But we're not doing that. We're just moving helter-skelter down the road of alternative sources when we don't have the capacity to have alternative sources pick up what is the energy need of the United States and the world. And who's it affecting the most? It's affecting people on Main Street, the cost of their daily life.
I don't think we're all that far off from kind of agreeing that this is a long-term problem, that there need to be policies in place to do this, and the long-term solutions will be what will protect especially the most needy. It's a thoughtful conversation. I really appreciate having you guys here. We're out of time right now, but we will definitely have you both back. Heidi and Judd, thank you guys. Have a great long weekend, okay?
Have a great weekend, Becky.
Thank you.